Will we all please stand?
Pastor Greg couldn't make it tonight, so he asked me if I would stand in his stead tonight. So let's bow our heads, Lord. As we are gathered here tonight, I humbly ask for your guidance, your wisdom, and your support as we begin this meeting to conduct the business of our great city. God, help us to engage in meaningful discussions, allow us to grow closer as a group, and make the best decisions for our community. God, fill us with your wisdom and grace as we make those decisions that might affect us and all those around us. Lord, let us be reminded that all we do here tonight, all that we accomplish, let it first be pleasing unto you, and then for the greater good of our city. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll call to order this city council meeting of Oakville, West Virginia, March 10th, 2025. City Manager, would you please give us our roll call?
Mayor Charles Briscoe.
Here,
Council at Large Hannah Bass.
Here.
Councilors from Ward 1. Terry Van Buskirk.
Here.
Roger Evans.
Here.
Diana Janey. Here. Councilors from Ward 2. Liskus. Absent. Elder.
Here.
Skill.
Here.
thank you. You've all read the minutes in your packet. If we begin the voting process, if we can get a motion to accept those.
Move to accept the minutes.
Do we have a second, please?
I second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes as read, excuse me. All those in favor? All opposed? So moved. Same with the treasurer's report. May we have a motion for that?
I just want to remind you on this treasurer's report that you are voting to accept the report that's been presented, not approve.
I move to accept the treasury.
We have a motion and a second to accept the treasurer's report. Any further questions? All those in favor? All opposed? That motion is carried as well. Do we have any correspondence? No correspondence. All right, moving right along. Citizens' comments. All right, we have first up, former Councilman Charles Smallwood. Welcome back. It's always good to see you.
Order disabled, but of time I'll pass these around. These two are- This information should be a catalyst for discussion and future actions. I'd like for you to think about the significance of these facts. January 2024 meeting. 5 properties were presented for demolition under the REAP program. One of these being the historic Oakville School in Harlem Heights. It was stated that the building was beyond repair and dangerous, and that Chapman had done an assessment of the building. One question: why Chapman instead of structural inspection? Unanimous vote to bid all properties. By the way, the Oakville School at one time was used as a community center and a satellite police station, according to the Fayette Tribune 3/26/97. February the 19th, 2024, the bid was awarded. It was stated that the contractor didn't meet the deadline. The church representative that it would be their responsibility. Did the other 4 structures get demolished? It was also stated that funds would be available in the fall of 2024. June 2024, delegation of 3 ladies appeared before the council asking about the demolition of the school. They were asking for help. It stated once again, funds might come available in the fall. So the church, using their little money, what they had the building for them. And I would like to know, could the city reimburse the church for having the building demolished? They are not asking for that. They didn't tell me to come up here. February 2024 meeting, the Parks and Recreation Director stated that the playground at Harlem Heights, Broadway Avenue, was approved for an upgrade, wood fiber instead of pea gravel, 2 handicap accessible swings to meet ADA compliance. It was slated to start in the spring of 2024. Prior to that meeting, an assessment was done in January of 2023 on all parks to check for ADA compliance. And a report was written to make all parks ADA compliant. And this has not been completed yet. I also will refer you to ordinance 2.06.030. September 23rd, 2019, Recreation Committee met and discussed cameras and lighting on the loop trail at Harlem Heights.
Go ahead, Mr. Small.
October 28th, 2019, it was on their agenda. Under council comments, May 2021, September 13th, 2021, there was October 11th, 2021, November 8th, 2021, December 2022. You will find that in council comments that I made, cameras was mentioned. 12/9/2024 meeting, the lieutenant of the Oak Hill Police Department talked about the importance of cameras. That cameras had helped solve the crime at Hickory Park. Council voted to buy cameras using the opioid funds, spending up to $75,000. And I think some of those cameras should be used at the Russell Matthew Park. The drainage in Harlem Heights. Under council comments, you will find this problem was mentioned 3 times. October 2023, Deborah Wallace addressed the council about the drainage problems in Harlem Heights. And we still have that problem, as you see in the pictures that I'm passing around. June 2024 meeting, a delegation of 3 ladies from the Harlem Heights area talked about the trash issue. It was stated by a city official that the code enforcement officer has been out there a lot, and the city would eventually get blamed for picking on that area. Now, if someone is constantly breaking the ordinance or the law, why not continue to come out with it? May 8th, 2023, a motion that the council, mayor, and city manager sign a letter requesting that the bridge in Minden be replaced. Consideration be given for underwriting costs, and a letter be sent to the Department of Highways. I think there were some petitions that went along with that letter. We still haven't addressed the issue of the bridge. October the 10th, 2022, motion to come up with a comprehensive plan study for East End and other areas of Oak Hill, including the Minden project, which was already in the works, solve drainage problems for the entire city. That was a unanimous vote. September the 1st, 2022, a motion to rename a portion of Kelly Avenue, behind Comac to OHHS CHS Alumni Lane. Now, after 2.5 years later, we've moved inside. Also, I've mentioned several times that the sidewalk in front of that building needed repaired. By the way, there's a sign right below this building that says Kelly Avenue. August 2023. It was mentioned that the candidates misused the city logo during the last election in campaign flyers, signs, and letters, misleading the citizens. City manager had checked with the ethics commission and said it was okay because there was no copyright or trademark. I would like to know, has this issue been taken care of? Because I don't want someone else being falsely accused of misleading the citizens by using the logo. April 2023, council authorized the city manager to process a highway historical marker from West Virginia Archives and History for Marion McQuaid. I don't have that marker yet. Veterans Memorial. This grant money that came in 2000 from the House of Delegates and some more. I think in the Economic Development Coordinator report, she indicated that New River Gorge Regional Development Authority had openly offered to help the city with any kind of plans.
That's still a work in progress, by the way. I'm on that committee. We have accepted the design. We're also working with, what's the Woody Williams? I can't think of the guy's name. Woody Williams. He has the Gold Star Awards for families. We're possibly going to try to add that to the memorial. So that's why that's taken a little bit of a change.
The Oak Hill Board was established to honor people who go beyond their civic duty and are community driven. I submitted 2 names in October 2023. For the meeting of November 2023, I asked about the award. City manager indicated the committee has not yet met. December 2023, I asked about the award. It was told that the committee had met and they changed the awarding procedures and will meet again in February. When it was set up, the award was supposed to be one in the spring and one in the fall. Now, if I submitted one in October, nothing was done. November was nothing done. December, welcome video tour. Someone mentioned about video motion. And I would urge you to look at go on the website and look at the welcome video tour there and see if it represents. September the 1st, 2022, the digital signage for announcements of upcoming events in Oak Hill. It wasn't done. November the 8th, 2021, the evaluation committee developed an evaluation instrument for employees that report directly to the council. Motion was to accept the evaluation instruments and begin annual evaluation beginning July the 1st, 2022. Of course, I don't have to mention the Virginia sidewalks. The March the 13th, 2023. Consideration to add deputy chief to Oak Hill Police Department, second reading. Is that in the ordinance? Not added.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Smallwood. Mr. Barber? You're up next, and you will have 10 minutes as well, if you need it.
I don't talk
10
that
minutes?
slow.
Yeah, it's fine.
I was speech bubble.
All right, guys. Good to see everybody again. Thank you for your time. The reason I'm up here today, what I'd like to talk to you about is, I would like to, for your consideration, or I would like you guys to consider, allowing me to put together a town hall meeting with mayor, council members, downtown building owners, members of our municipal staff, and interested community members to give us an opportunity to meet with some representatives from the State Department of Arts, Culture, and History. They've got the State Historic Preservation Office is under them. And the reason would be to talk about establishing a National Register Historic District in downtown Oak Hill. And I know this is not new to anybody. We've talked about this, or this has been talked about back and forth before. There are quite a few misconceptions when it comes to that historic district. And it's been kind of confusing to try to get through it all. But by the time we got to the root of it, the bottom line is, I think it's something really worth considering for the city. I've already reached out to the State Preservation Office, and Cody Straley is the gentleman's name. He is the National Register and Architectural Survey Coordinator. He said that his department would be happy to participate in a community meeting with us to discuss the designation, answer questions, clear up any misunderstandings. If you were open to proceeding with this, Cody said that he'd be happy to work out a date in April to come down here to meet with us. And I think that would be great. So the reason this matters, if this is granted, this would give us the single most important tool that's needed to revitalize downtown Oak Hill. And that is access to the historical tax credits. These credits can be awarded for up to 55% of qualifying renovation expenses for remodeling buildings within that district. Of that 55%, 20% of it's on the federal side, 25% of it is on the state side for the historical tax credits. And I think there's some legislation going through the House right now to propose increasing the amount of funding available for those, and then also increasing the percentage from 25 to an even higher amount. Those credits, as far as our downtown renovation are concerned, those would be a game changer. Like if there's one dart that we can throw at that issue that could actually fix everything, so to speak, this one thing would be the catalyst that would make that happen. This would make building renovations. I'm sorry, I'm getting old. I got to hold this thing a little closer to my eyes so I can see. Those credits would be a game changer because they would make building renovations and investments feasible in the private sector, which right now with no credits, the investments don't make any sense. The math doesn't work out. That's really the reason why we're not seeing any growth or redevelopment in downtown Oak Hill right now, because if you look at it, if you're a business owner or a building owner, an investor, and you look at it on a spreadsheet, it doesn't make sense financially. You're just not going to see the return on investment for the amount of money that it's going to cost you to renovate those buildings. So you throw those historic tax credits into the game that can cover up to 55% of the costs to remodel your building. Now, all of a sudden, we're back on the charts and we're back in feasibility. That's the one thing that will spur investment in downtown Oak Hill. My initial look through the checklist, it looks like we've got a pretty good area that would be able to qualify for this. But it's definitely something that I think that we would want, or you guys would all want to talk about before we pursue it. And this part's important too while we're talking about it. The federal designation does not force building owners to only make specific renovations. That's usually the biggest complaint that I've heard in the past about this. However, if the building owner does want to use the tax credits, then you've got to operate within the guidelines. So it does not affect you whatsoever unless you want the money. And then if you do, yeah, then you have to play their game. But I think that makes sense, and we can all understand the need for that kind of accountability. This has proven to be a successful revitalization strategy in communities like the Elk City Historic District in Charleston. And myself, as well as Dr. Robert Love, we've met with a few folks already throughout the state to really get a feel for how these credits work, how you apply for them, and how we could functionally bring that to the city of Oak Hill to spur investment in downtown. But what we've got to have first is, I would like to have a meeting, if you guys are game with it, kind of a town hall style, so that we can talk to the folks from historic preservation and, get all the information out on the table and get all your questions answered. That's all I got. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
You're not expecting a check, are you?
Well, I mean, if you're offering.
We appreciate all that you do. Do you all have any questions for Ms. Ibarra, Mr. Smallwood?
No, Mr. Mayor, Alice and I was talking about this when we started with the vacant building registry.
Mhm.
That's kind of where I was talking about the city helping. That was what we was talking about. And I really believe that is going to be something that'd be very important for the city. Really.
Thank you both. We'll move along to unfinished business. First order of unfinished business is the Fayette County Soft Surface Trails Project Update.
Good evening, folks. I'm Cassandra Lawson. I'm with Region 4 Planning and Development Council. I think most of you probably know John Tuggle, our executive director, especially as he resides here. I don't do a lot of work in Oak Hill, so this is my first time meeting many of you, but I have been with the agency for about 14 years now. So we wanted to come before you this evening to provide an update on the Fayette County Soft Surface Trails Project, previously known as the Southern West Virginia Bike Trail Network. And it is a project that has some age on it. So I'd like to present you with a short history of the project, where it is today, and what we are doing to try to move it forward. The original project, as I mentioned, was titled the Southern West Virginia Bike Trail Network, linking trails and communities to spawn economic growth. And the original partners were the funding agency, the Appalachian Regional Commission, the West Virginia Department of Highways, Region 4, and the New River Trail Alliance. The project received funding from ARC in June of 2017, with the DOH serving as the basic agency for those funds. The Appalachian Regional Commission is kind of like a quasi-federal agency, but it just serves the area of Appalachia. And anytime that agency funds a construction project, they require that you partner with another federal agency to oversee the construction of the project, because they are a smaller federal agency. At the time that this project was funded, that was really the only option for this project. And the Department of Highways also committed the entirety of the cash match that was required for the project as well. The original scope was to develop connector trails that would link existing trails to one another, along with the use of West Virginia DOH roads via way signage. And the original project was to promote linkages across communities, spawning a 3-county region, including Fayette, Nicholas, and Greenbrier counties. This proved extremely difficult to fit within the confines of the DOH program for a couple of reasons. They had very rigorous property purchasing requirements. So when trying to purchase easements to make those linkages, it wasn't an easy process to navigate. Their engineering requirements were also very stringent, and they just really were not on board with promoting the use of highways, promoting bicycle use on US highways. After about 3 years of scoping discussions, in June of 2020, a scope to develop a paved rail trail from the Whipples Ford to Glen Jean was agreed upon. However, in 2021, the matching funds for the project were unexpectedly reappropriated. So that just kind of left the project in limbo. By this time, however, the West Virginia Development Office was providing this basic agent service that we're talking about. So it did provide at least an opportunity to work with the Development Office as the basic agency, if the matching funds could be found. In late 2022, the New River Gorge Regional Development Authority was approved for a $1.5 million congressionally directed spending request, what we all call earmarks. That was on behalf of the National Park Service, and it was from the Department of the Interior. So this allocation to the New River Gorge RDA presented itself as an opportunity to transform their $1.5 million project into a $2.5 million project by combining it with the ARC funds for the implementation of the Fayette Trail Coalition's Fayette County Soft Surface Trail Plan. That still left the need, however, for non-federal match to match the ARC funds, which the Fayette County Commission did contribute. And in addition, the city of Oak Hill also contributed $50,000. This scope change, this is a huge change, going from a, region-wide bike trail project down to a paved rail trail and, back to this implementing the Fayette County Soft Surface Trail Plan. So that necessitated the need for us to request a scope amendment from ARC. We pretty much had to rewrite the entire application. It's not a super simple application, so that took quite a bit of time. But it was submitted in December 2024 and it is pending approval. We haven't heard back from them to date, but John is actually at a conference in DC where many ARC staff folks will be. So we're hoping maybe he'll come back with an update. So all in all, the project team now consists of the New River Gorge RDA, Fayette County Commission, City of Oak Hill, Fayette Trail Coalition, and Still Yet Region 4. And we're working to be as proactive as possible to move the project forward following the ARC approval. We want to be ready to roll once that is received. So the next step is engineering, procurement, design, and getting through the environmental process. And we hope to advertise for engineering services this month, with interviews following in late April or early May. We will have an interview committee, and we would ask someone from the city of Oak Hill to sit on that committee to be a part of that selection process. That doesn't have to be acted upon this evening, but just a note there. Once we have an engineering firm on board, we will be better equipped to provide an updated construction schedule. And so that's really where we are. So it was funded in 2017. Here we are in 2025, but we're still working very hard to bring it to fruition. And so, because it does have so much age, again, we just weren't really sure, how affiliated, how familiar council was with this project, your contribution to it. And so we really just wanted to come and provide an update. Unless you have any questions.
Any questions?
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, and I hope to see you again soon.
Number 2, our building commission update on the former BB&T building.
And send us an email. She says she's running several targeted ads in different areas, and she has some new ads running in state and local newspapers. And she's been getting several calls about the listing information, but she's only had one person show up in real life. But she's still getting a lot of interest. And since there's a break in the weather, she thinks she thinks we don't still need a price adjustment. And someone called and made a very low offer, sight unseen. And she requested proof of funds and a formal written offer, and she hasn't gotten that yet. The Nicholas County broker is still waiting for some completed estimates from his contractor to make an offer, and that they will make an offer when they receive the quote. And then the investor that was considering it for telecommunications are still considering it, but they haven't done anything else with it. And then she should be making her video for tomorrow. So I think there's been some maybe talk that we would take any offer on this building that was given to us, but that's something that the building commission really doesn't want to do because we know we're going to take a financial hit. So we still would like to remain firm on the price that we have that we're at, $675,000.
questions for city manager? All right. Moving along to number 3, the consideration of an amendment to the municipal code 11.16.010C concerning rental and commercial property eyesores. This is the second reading.
So this is the same, the reading that we had last month, the first reading. Just adding to this. And talk to you all, let you know what she does, what the firm does, how that all works. And she'll have a quote for us in writing. And so if it's okay with you all, put that on the agenda. They do a lot of stuff.
Any other questions? Before we move into new business, I would like to welcome a new business, Mountain State Masterpieces, on Main Street down by C&O Cleaners. They opened up over the weekend, so. Welcome to Oak Hill. I think we all know Kevin and Tiffany, so bring a lot of business to the town. Number 6, new business, Planning Commission appointment to replace Chris Gill as council representative.
This should be a city council member, to replace Chris. Let's see.
Take that spot.
I'll make a motion to appoint Terry Van Busker for that spot. Place of Chris Gill.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and second to replace Chris Gill on the Planning Commission with Terry Van Buskirk. Excuse me, got candy. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you both. Number 7, appoint city manager position to the New River Transit Authority Board for a 3-year term beginning April 1st, 2025 and ending March 31st, 2028.
I sit on the board of New River Transit Authority, and the term is ending at the end of March. And so they have asked if we could just appoint the city manager position so that when city managers change, they don't have to go back and have.
Do that in. To appoint the city manager position to the New York Transit Authority Board for
This one, I guess, unless we would lose our spot.
Yeah.
I think they have to.
I would be. So, I move to appoint the city manager position of the city of Oakville, New River Transit Authority.
I'll second that.
We have motion and second to appoint city manager position to the New River Transit Authority Board. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Number 8, our budget approval for fiscal year 26.
This is basically the same thing that we talked about, that we've been looking at. When we got our rates or our amounts from the county, we ended up with about $36,000 extra, I think. That was almost exactly enough to cover the PEIA increase. I think we had maybe like $2,000. So we took that extra money from the property tax and put in the exact PEIA rates, or it was just an estimate. So we put in those rates. And so we are expecting 6.2 million, 6,287,103. We're planning or estimating a fund balance carryover of 350,000. It does not show in this number. And then our expenditures. Those are $6,637,100, which is $350,000 more than that. What is its balanced budget? Oh, that's 6,280. $50,000 difference because the fund balance doesn't show up on this report. And that was in your packet, or if you want us to look at anything on there.
This is still just giving us the 200,000 cushion, right? Correct? You had spoke about the last meeting that we had.
Yeah, that's our carryover. 350,000.
Talking about last time with the sales tax revenue, you was taking 1.175 out of it. It was supposed to leave us with a $200,000 cushion. Correct.
So that is, that's what you say, said. I probably did say we would estimate. We needed, which I think will. Just roll that over into the next year. At the end of, in July, when we find out actually what our fund balance carryover is, if it's more than 350,000, then we will revision extra into this budget, into the budget.
What was the carryover from last year? Do you remember? This budget? Meeting, which was gonna leave us about 200,000 as a cushion.
That'll leave about 200,000 in the pay fund, I mean, in the sales
That's what
tax
you're
fund.
saying.
Yes.
I'll be honest, I've looked at the budget for the last 2 years. And year before last, we had to move 912 to cover the year. This year in January, we moved 250. And in February, we moved another 400. And me personally, I cannot vote for this budget because I do not think that it is obtainable. There's just no way I can do that. I feel that we're setting ourselves up for failure, and if we're only leaving ourselves with $200,000, use $650,000 in 7 months. How you're going to cover next year at that, 200 left over. And granted, I understand we may get 300 carried over from this year. What happens if we don't? And right now, I've talked to several business owners, and P&O tax is going to be way down this year. Sales tax are going to be down this year. So, I mean, I just don't understand where that's going to come from. It's the one thing that worries me.
We do have to present a budget that our expenses
understand that.
equal our revenues.
I understand. Just can't.
Mr. Busker, what would you change?
To be honest with you, I don't really know. I don't know where we can go with this. I've sat down, I've looked. And I know overtime is something that we have no choice. Okay, I mean, I understand police officers, they have overtime. Street workers, they have to have overtime. And we got a bigger winter this year than we've had in the last couple. I just don't really know where we can go different. I really don't know.
So from now, tonight, of bringing this up until we do a revision in July, this is to say that we can meet this budget for next year with what we have carried over.
Starts in July 1st.
Yeah. That's what this is saying, is that we have to present a balanced budget to them. And this is a balanced budget. Right. And if things are looking really good, or if things are looking really bad, that's when we adjust in July.
We have to
Anyone else have any questions? Take a moment, we'll prepare the vote. Motion. Second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the budget approval for fiscal year 2026. Any further questions?
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
roll call.
With a roll call vote here, all right. It'll be just fine.
No. Yes.
And 4-2 majority rules. So that motion has been passed. Move along to our workshop on land reuse agencies. Good timing.
That's right. Thank you.
Would you like a brief moment to set up and I'll let these guys take a quick recess?
That's fine.
All right.
Thank you.
Guys, we'll come back in 5 minutes.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Good to see you. We are ready to resume. We've had a few people complain tonight from the viewership on TV and on YouTube. They're asking our council members to get to your microphone. So please talk into your microphones. And so we won't get any more complaints. Thank you very much. So we will now continue with our workshop on the land reuse agencies. Floor is yours.
All right, thank you. My name's Michael Taylor. I'm an attorney from the Pence Law Firm in Charleston. I've been assisting the city of Oak Hill in a property matter related to the Collins High School, former Collins High School. And as part of that kind of process, that created a larger dialogue with the city regarding, well, what do we do about vacant, abandoned structures, tax delinquent structures, when we have unique situations such as the Collins property or really any property in the city? How best can the city address these types of structures, buildings, properties that are vacant, abandoned, maybe routinely delinquent on taxes, attracting the wrong element and things of that nature. So that is what a land reuse agency is for. The West Virginia legislature created in 2014 this thing called the Land Reuse Agency, and it permitted counties and or municipalities to create a separate agency. So it's not, the city council, it would be a separate agency that has its own separate board appointed by the city to address these property issues throughout the city. And the reason that the legislature passed such a law is because we all know when there are dilapidated structures throughout the city or the county or abandoned or just property that's not being taken care of, it's a blight, and it affects the neighbors, it affects the community as a whole. And so what the legislature did was use this statute to allow the cities through this agency or county through its agency to address these issues. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what a land reuse agency is. You may have heard the term a land bank before, or land banking, or anything like that. And that's essentially what the land reuse agency is. It's a land bank. It permits a government entity to acquire property with the hope of either rehabbing it, cleaning it up, applying for grants that private citizens may not otherwise be eligible for, to clean up the property, to get it, clean it up, get clear up title with it, and then hopefully sell it back into the market for a private citizen. And then that becomes back on the tax rolls, and hopefully it's a private citizen that will take care of the property and the investment that the agency has put in to rehab the property. There are other mechanisms. The land reuse agency could, in theory, also rent property. So they could, in theory, acquire an apartment building and upgrade it, and then enter into leases with people for the purchase or for housing and things like that. So that's basically what a land reuse agency is. And by the way, feel free to interrupt me at any time. Ask any and all questions that you have. I like interaction. It's good. Otherwise I'll just drone on up here until you all fall asleep about the land reuse agency. So that's what it is. So why do you want one? For the reasons why we have a land reuse agency, or why the statute created one, is it allows the city or county or government agency to address these issues. The city is very restricted in its ability to acquire property, to sell property, and things like that. Cities, if they are going to dispose of property, they'll have to auction it off. And if you auction it off, you may not get the investment that you want out of it. There's other restrictions that you have to deal with this. The land reuse agency does not have any of those restrictions. There's very little restrictions on a land reuse agency in the terms of acquiring property and disposing of property. There's very few restrictions. In fact, one of the main restrictions is that a land reuse agency cannot exercise a thing called eminent domain, which eminent domain is essentially the government's ability to say this, we need this property for a public use and pay you for fair market value. The land reuse agency can't do that. They otherwise operate in what we would call the open market or the free market. They can approach anybody and say, we'll pay you X number of dollars for this property. The person can take it and say sure, or negotiate, or say no, and then the land reuse agency maybe goes on to the next piece of property or whatever. The land reuse agency can acquire property through gifts, through transfers from other government agencies. And so once the land reuse agency has that property in their possession, the statute requires them to basically put it back on the market, or put it, so the public knows that the land reuse agency owns this property. And if you want to buy it, how much do you want to sell it for? You can sell it for any amount. So it's up to the land reuse agency to decide. So if they buy a piece of property for $1,000 and they get $10,000 into it, they could sell it for $11,000. They could sell it for $400,000. They could sell it for $1. They have, whatever they want to do, they have the power to decide what's best in moving these properties. Some, especially when you're dealing with dilapidated and abandoned structures, you may run into a situation where the property maybe looks good in theory, it's in a good location, or it's near a high traffic area, or it has a nice structure on it, just needs a little bit of work on the inside. So the land reuse agency could buy it for whatever they buy it for, put as much money into it as they want, and they could sell it or lease it or whatever. So it's land reuse agency is a very good agency that can be created to deal with these issues. And the land reuse agency is not restricted in the type of property they can buy. I keep mentioning, abandoned structures or delinquent taxes or dilapidated structures or things like that. That's not the restriction. The land reuse agency could go buy the nicest house on the block if they want, so long as somebody is willing to enter into that transaction and the land reuse agency deems it an appropriate purchase. So it's literally no restrictions. It would just be like the government opening it up its own real property kind of investment firm and operating that to some extent. So that's basically what a land reuse agency is. Now, not everything's perfect, right? And so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there aren't issues with land reuse agencies. The biggest issue, there's really, in my opinion, two big issues with a land reuse agency. The first issue is it's a whole separate board, which means that it's up to the city council to fill that board. And I know that sometimes finding sufficient members in the community to serve on these boards without compensation and putting in that commitment can be difficult. The statute requires a minimum of 5 board members. And one of those board members has to be somebody that's a public member. That is a member that lives in the community and is a member of a civic organization that is related to basically the betterment of the community. That's a pretty broad, requirement, but it is a requirement, and that does, in theory, narrow your field of candidates down. So if you create this board, you have to find people to serve on it. The other thing about land reuse agencies that is difficult is funding. As it stands right now, now the current legislative session's not over. Who knows what could happen, but there's nothing brewing or percolating that would relate to land reuse agencies and funding. And it's that land reuse agencies have no funding mechanism right now. There's no legislative pool, money that they've set aside where people can pull from. And so the funding is going to have to come from either grants or federal grants, private grants, things like that, or allocations from the city to the land reuse agency to operate. In the funding for the operation of it is really not to pay people, but to acquire property, to rehab property, to do things like that. So the two biggest downfalls with a land reuse agency is board membership and funding. Now, the way that the statute's set up, though, with the funding is once a land reuse agency gets some properties and starts acquiring properties under the statute and any ordinance that the city would pass, it should hopefully then become a self-funding thing. Once they get kind of a nest egg of properties, assuming they can move those properties, then they get to keep the proceeds from any sales that they make. And so that's a way that they can generate revenue by acquiring properties and then selling them, hopefully at a profit. That profit can be put back in the land use agency to continue going. The other thing is, you may not even have to buy property. People may be willing to transfer property over to you, to the agency for free, and then that would help with your stockpile of property. There are also a large number of grants that are available for rehabbing and cleaning and demolishing. There's REAP grants, which a LRA would be eligible for because the LRA is still technically a government entity. It's a government organization, so it's eligible for any and all grants and aids and things that would otherwise be any government would be eligible. So that's something that also is hopeful, but as of now, there's just not a lot of great funding opportunities out there. I mean, admittedly, that's the hardest part with land reuse agencies. They don't technically cost anything to create because the board members serve without compensation. They would just cost money. It just would cost money to be effective in utilizing its powers. So that's kind of where we're at. So with a land reuse agency. So how do you create a land reuse agency? You would create it just by how you would create it, passing any other ordinance. You would just pass an ordinance. The statute requires certain things be in the ordinance that you would have. I draft the ordinance for you, and you would have to, as a municipality, do your 2 readings and then pass it like that. There are a number of areas in the state that have utilized land reuse agencies. From a municipality level, the most prominent and the biggest land reuse agency is in Charleston. The city of Charleston has a land reuse agency, and their land reuse agency is very active. And they were so active, in fact, that they were involved in a pretty hefty lawsuit related to the parking garages at the mall down there. The land reuse agency apparently had some ownership interest in those parking garages. So that's again another thing. A land reuse agency can acquire parking garages if they want. So that's something that Charleston has utilized it. Huntington has a land reuse agency, and in Fayette County, the Fayette County Commission has a land reuse agency. So why does the city need a land reuse agency if the county has a land reuse agency, right? Well, number one, despite the fact that the land reuse agency would be a separate governmental entity, if it's the city's land reuse agency, the city council still has control over the board members. They appoint the board members for numbers of terms and things like that. So there is an answerability to the city council that otherwise doesn't exist at the county level. You can't decide who sits on the county land reuse agency. The other aspect of it is if the city would create this land reuse agency under the statute, the county could not operate within the city boundaries. The law basically states that a county can create a land reuse agency. The county can then operate anywhere within the county that there's not a land reuse agency. So if the city would create a land reuse agency, the county could not operate within the city. unless you would enter into an intercooperational agreement, which the statute contemplates and encourages. They want counties and municipalities, and you could work with your neighboring municipalities, so they would create one and kind of all pool your resources. They want this to be a successful program, but they also don't want the county to come in and overstep and maybe you purchase property that the city wanted to purchase through their land reuse agency and things like that. So if you did create one, you would be able to operate within the city without any effect from the county, unless you entered into an intergovernmental cooperation agreement on that. So that's, I mean, essentially it. Any questions?
What safeguards are there to prevent corruption? And I'll give you an example. You have a bunch of politicians sitting in these seats who appoint the land reuse agency, and if their goal is to funnel property bought with taxpayers' money to certain individuals in the community that are political cronies, that kind of situation, what safeguards are there for that?
Well, so there could be a number of things. First of all, the West Virginia Ethics Act would always apply. And so the West Virginia Ethics Act would potentially govern situations regarding the transfer of properties and things like that. So you got that overarching scheme of the West Virginia Ethics Act. The statute itself also has a conflict of interest provision in it, where it's basically like, we adopt the West Virginia Ethics Act, and every member on this agency is subject to the West Virginia Ethics Act. But then on top of that, the city council, when in its ordinance, can create additional conflicts of interest issues. So you could, through your ordinance, further regulate the sell and transfer of property and restrict who can buy it and things like that. The other aspect of it is the land reuse agency is a board, and so for it to take action, the board has to take action, and so you always are going to have the board come together in order to approve any transaction. So it couldn't just be like, we're the land reuse agency and I'm on it and I want to get you some property, so I acquire it and then funnel it to you. It'd have to go before the board, and the board would ultimately have to approve it after an open meeting. The land reuse agency is subject to the Open Governmental Proceedings Act. Their minutes are subject to FOIA and have to be published. If they have a meeting, they have to notice it under the sunshine laws. The other aspect of it is, in the statute, every land reuse agency meeting must, by law, have a public comment section. So the public can come and they have a right to speak at the meeting. So through all of those kind of things, that's where you're going to get your protections. Is that foolproof? No. I mean, but that's on par and on line with every other agency and entity in the state being governed by the Ethics Act, and then open meetings, public notice, public comment. I mean, those are your hallmarks of to try to prevent corruption. And then the fact that it's a board and one individual cannot act, the whole board has to act. Those are the things that you're going to hopefully have that would prevent that type of corruption.
Are the terms of office with the agency, are they staggered so that?
So good question. So that is actually up to the city council.
Okay.
The city council has a lot of discretion in how they want to set the terms of the board members, if they want to stagger and if they just want to do 1 year for all of them, and every year you got to reappoint them, or 1 year, 2 year, however you want to do it. That the statute gives broad discretion to the municipality that's creating the land reuse agency and how they want to structure it. There are certain requirements, such as you have to have a public member, but other than that, it's very wide open in terms of how you want to staff or appoint to the board on that. The other aspect is, I keep saying staff. under the statute, the land reuse agency is empowered to have a staff if they want to create a staff, but of course that's a funding issue. The other thing that the land reuse agency is entitled to do under the statute is to enter into a contract or an agreement with the city where the city can provide the staffing needs or services for the land reuse agents as well. So,
And I think you've gone over it with us before, but I'm going to ask you again.
sure.
This, if you could describe the advantage, we have a building commission.
Yeah.
And the advantage of having a land reuse authority or agency in addition to the building commission.
Yeah, so generally from a very high level, a building commission is more designed to own property that the city intends to use for its own purposes. So a lot of times if you were going to build a new courthouse or new city hall, you would want the building commission to be the technical owner of the land and the building of the property. They're not really equipped to go out and buy that broken down piece of garbage property over there, rehab it, and then sell it in the open market. That's not really, they're not that nimble enough to do that. They're more of a own property for government use. The land reuse agency is very nimble. They can buy and sell any property, any real property. The other interesting thing, excuse me, is that the land reuse agency could buy property that also has mineral rights attached to it. So if the property is sitting over a big oil and gas, shale, the Marcellus shale or whatever, the land reuse agency can buy the mineral rights and the real property. The only restriction on that is a land reuse agency can never buy just the mineral rights. They always have to have the land attached. But once they buy the land, there is no restriction in the statute where you could sever the land from the minerals, and the land reuse agency could hold the mineral rights and sell off the land. And so, I mean, that's another potential advantage. Building commissions really can't do that. So that's kind of the difference. I mean, the legislature was really trying to create a nimble governmental agency, as nimble as a governmental agency can be, that can address real property issues in a jurisdiction. So that's kind of that's the main difference. Is land reuse agencies are there to gobble up the land in bad land, make it better, sell it out. Building commissions are designed to buy land, build government structures on them.
Can the land reuse agency, can they purchase property for the use of the city?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's no restriction. I mean, that's what's beautiful about the land reuse agency is there's no restriction. They could gift it to the builder. They could acquire the property and then they could dispose of it by transferring it to the building commission if they wanted to, without a fee, just a straight transfer. They can do that. So the legislature, a little bit of more legislative history. The legislature, before they created this land reuse agency, had another statute. It was an entity that the Fayette County had. It was called the Fayette County Urban Renewal Authority. Urban renewal authorities were really a precursor to this land reuse agency. And what the legislature was trying to do is kind of create a land banking with the URAs, but not really. It's like kind of land banking, but not really. URAs are extremely restrictive into what kind of property they can buy. They can only acquire property that has been declared blighted property. So the city council or the county commission would have to declare this is a blighted area and declare it as such. And then they have to put a bunch of money to create a redevelopment plan. And then in line with that plan, the URA can come in and start acquiring property only in that blighted area. And then under the plan, they had to redevelop it. And then if they wanted to sell it, it's the most convoluted selling process in the world. You get a bid or you get an offer to purchase, and then under the URA law, they have to take that offer and advertise it and say, we just received an offer to purchase this property for $5. We've got to advertise it. Now we've got to have public meetings on whether we should accept this offer, or if anybody else wants to come in and make an offer. And then it takes the selling of property months, if not a year, to sell property, right? And then they've got all these restrictions. LRAs are completely different. They can go buy any property that they want. It doesn't have to be a blighted area. They can go anywhere within their jurisdiction, purchase the property. And then once they're ready to sell it, the board would take action to approve the sell in one public meeting. You don't have to advertise the bid price that you got. You sell it and you move on to the next. So it really is a great advantage over the URA. URA does have eminent domain power. But governments, we talk about eminent domain, and it's a great thing to have, but governments are always very careful to exercise that because you're taking somebody's property. We don't like to do that. So this is a much free market system. We're not forcing people to sell. People can say we're not selling. Okay, all right, we'll move on. There is another thing. I'll mention it, though it's not. I'll mention it because part of it is good and part of it is bad. Is the LRA is entitled under by a statute, they're entitled to go buy tax delinquent properties. So they can go. So if there's tax delinquent properties that are for auction, the LRA is entitled to go and bid on those properties and buy them. So that's good. That gives you another opportunity to go and buy the property. There is a provision in the statute, though it's sunshines, meaning it goes away unless legislative changes occur in July of this year. And it's this right of first refusal on tax delinquent properties. There are certain criteria that if a piece of property meets this certain criteria, the LRA can go and buy that property for the back taxes without it ever going to auction. And then there's a very convoluted process about how you clear the title. I don't recommend entities really engage in that unless, and for a couple of reasons. One is it sunshines in July of this year, number one. Number two is the tax delinquent process is a landmine for potential lawsuits against government agencies. I've represented various entities in tax delinquent property lawsuits, and they're not winners for the government. They generally lose those. And so I kind of am always weary of advising governments to get in the delinquent tax property game, because it's bad. It's tough for governments because the due process clause of the Constitution is you're taking their property without due process, and all of a sudden it's a six-figure lawsuit on a $1,000 piece of property. So, but that is there, and in that is a good way for land reuse agency to go to the auction and buy property at auction, and that can help build up your inventory. The other thing is that the land reuse agency has what's called an expedited quiet title proceeding. So if there is so let's say, let's use a hypothetical. Let's say there's a very nice, very large piece of property that has a number of buildings on them that have essentially been abandoned by the current owner, and has become a magnet for people to break in and steal copper and maybe create meth labs in there. And the current property owner says, well, we're done using it. It reverts back to the previous owner, and who that previous owner is has long since died, and his children have long since died. So we've got this messy heirship. Who knows who really owns the property? Well, to clear it up, you'd have to file what's called a quiet title action in the court. And those can take a very long time because courts are busy, and that's a low priority for them. Under the law, you have a very quick process. Like we're talking like 60 or so days, which is any court proceeding that can be done in 60 or so days is beautiful. So the LRA has the advantage of where they can utilize the expedited quiet title proceedings and clear up that title very quickly. So the property's not just hanging in legal limbo for years. The statute's very much designed and encouraged to allow, take the bad property, get it good, get it back into the open market, back on the tax rolls, and back into private citizens' hands.
Can the land reuse agency, acquire debt?
So yeah, there are provisions where they can enter into loans and promissory notes and things of that nature. So they could go get a loan on a property. They could get collateral, use property as a collateral and things like that. Thus far, they can get bonds issued, things of that nature. So far, I'm not overly familiar with the inner workings of the Charleston Land Reuse Agency in terms of what kind of debt that they are, but the other land reuse agencies in the state generally are trying to just not engage in practices of getting loans and things like that. They're looking for grants and free, cheap and free property. That's really what they're looking. But it is a option available. It's a power that the entity has. The other thing is the Land Reuse Agency is a separate entity from the city council. So any actions or inactions that they take fall upon them. So there won't, a lawyer could do this, but legally, the actions of the Land Reuse Agency are separate and apart from the actions of the city council. So if they do something wrong, it should not result in liability on the part of the city council. It also, the Land Reuse